Well, here we are. This is the end. So, Christina, how are you?
So, Jim, I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Uh, it's a Friday, and I am looking out the window, sunshiny day, and just glad to have one more conversation with you.
Right. This is my last day of ROM, so I'm free after this.
Yay, that's good.
Yay.
And so I think we wanted to just button this up with an interview of each other, where we've been talking to other people, but maybe we could set the stage to let some folks let them know about kind of our own kind of scenario and story and backstory over here, and maybe some lessons learned that we've gotten along the way might be helpful for some other people.
Yeah.
So, could you start off just by kind of saying what does your situation look like right now, as far as like your family dynamics and kind of where you live and all that kind of thing?
Okay, so right now, I am 38, probably soon to be 39. Last year of my 30s, that's a lot. And I am not married, single. I have a cat, Lieutenant Dan, who has been heavily featured on this delightful podcast. Currently going to be finishing up my tour with CAG 7 here in a few months and heading out to California next for my next command. Live in Norfolk, and I have thoroughly enjoyed my almost probably 15 months living here. Even with COVID and everything, it's a really delightful little piece of. I just love. I've enjoyed the history and being able to get out and hiking, and I've had some friends who live close enough that we've been able to kind of socially distance, but still do some kind of side trips on weekends. So that has been sort of my dynamic. I have my mom. She lives in Indiana with my brother. She's a full-time caretaker for him. My younger brother, he's 3 years younger than I am, is he was diagnosed at closely shortly after his birth with severe disabilities.
Hmm.
His sort of prognosis is about, I call it like a nonverbal 3-year-old. He is amazing, very, very um, sweet young man. He's not so young anymore. He's in the 30s now. We stay connected. This last year has been a little hard because he does have some health concerns, so we kind of do the whole not visiting. So I haven't seen my family in probably almost 2 years. So that dynamic has been very difficult. But when at PCS, I'm going to see them. We do talk on the phone. The other night we were video chatting, and my brother heard my voice and he like came in and was really excited. So that's great. I also have an older sister, and she is married with 3 children. And yeah, so that's kind of my immediate family. And kind of, I always talk about one of the skill sets that I have really well is being able to make connection with people quickly wherever I go. That's something I sort of had to learn. I took a lot of jobs, especially in my 20s and early 30s, that really, I don't want to say forced me, but they would be contract jobs, or I would be in a place for a short time. So I had to learn to build my own support system. So
Mm-hmm.
for me, family just doesn't look like my immediate family. I have a lot of aunts and uncles and cousins who kind of, after my father passed away, sorry, that's another dynamic. After my father passed away when I was 9, kind of helped to that extended family. But they mostly live in Indiana. If you live in other states, but for me, a lot of my support, especially if it's an immediate area, I have found that making connections through work or church or different social settings kind of help me stay grounded wherever I find myself at. So that's me in a nutshell. What about you,
Yeah.
Jeremy?
So married, got 3 kids, got 13, I'm sorry, 12 going on 20, got a
I thought you
10
said you
going
had
on
13
18.
kids.
I know, right? No, oh gosh, no. Uh, so a 12-year-old going on 20 it seems like, and a 10-year-old going on 18 it seems like, and a 6 turning 7. Um, got a little dog which we've seen, little Oreo. Um, my bride is about to get her license as an LPC, a therapist. Yay. So she, while we've been here, has been just seeing tons of clients. And so we've been
Mhm.
um, kind of port and starboard, kind of making family work during this time. Um, we're both from Florida and really miss seeing our family during this COVID time as well. Um, so they're really good. Let's see. I think the most part here. So I'm obviously stationed at Naval Support Activity South Potomac. So that means I'm the shore installation support down in the southern National Capital Region area, down in the Naval District, Washington. And so I support Naval Support Facility Dahlgren, Naval Support Facility Indian Head, Maryland, Stumpneck Annex. Um, so that's keeps us busy here.
Yeah.
So I think we had a few questions here. We've had a lot of conversations over the last several months, and the topics always seem to bubble up about staying healthy and maintaining positive connections and having a strong connection to something beyond yourself. For us, obviously, that we mean spiritual connection. Um,
Mhm.
so how does that translate for you? That's that spiritual connection, that kind of staying healthy and positive, those
Um,
strong connections.
yeah. So again, going back to just, kind of like the three sort of things that I preach a lot to other people. Sometimes I don't do so well myself is emotional, physical, spiritual. Um, Emotional, I think that I'm a pretty self-aware person. Seminary did a pretty good job of prepping me for, hey, you're about to go into ministry. You need to sort of get your head on straight and understand where your trigger points are. And the seminary, at least with my Lutheran background, they really kind of do pretty well to kind of prep you for, hey, this is where this is at. Things that didn't prepare me for the life that I've led. I spent 3 years in remote Alaska as a pastor, and the isolation that I felt there, really kind of helped me as I moved into my naval career of, hey, staying connected via, doing a tech study group that on over, well, it was not Zoom, but we did another one. I was doing that back in like 2014, 2015 before it was really cool. So
Wow.
really study of the word is, and when I say intentional, like I really, for me, attending worship, like the sacraments, like if I'm talking about my own spiritual faith here, Lutherans believe in, two sacraments of baptism and communion. And I think over this past year, I've had communion maybe 4 times. And
Mm.
that's very important. I would, if I had my way, I'd do it every week or every day if I could. But for me, I really enjoy, or I really find meaningfulness in the in-depth study of the word. So we'll have the lectionary and we'll do the readings and, just meeting with other people who have really, really like other theologians, pastors, whatever, of different denominations, and having that deep conversation is kind of like not just going like an inch deep, but going like a couple miles of like
Mm.
what's the origin of the word, Greek, Hebrew, all that kind of stuff. I think for like the physical, so I like uh, dessert. I love it. So I remember when the pandemic first started, I would go down to Fresh Market every day to the point. It was like 6 weeks in, and the guy at the Fresh Market counter knew my name and my order before I even walked in. And
Yes,
at
that's
that
so good.
point, I realized I was like, ooh,
And what were you getting?
maybe. So it was like chocolate cake or like
Ooh.
fruit
Mm.
tart. It just depended
Mm.
on the day. Like, oh, I had a bad day. I feel like or like the case there is like, it's amazing. It's so beautiful. And you just look at it, it's presented so well. Anyway, but I'd be walking 5 miles a day. So I'm like walking, I'm like, oh, it
Yeah.
totally evens out. So for me, a lot of it is just getting out into nature. Like, um, that it's been proven, just being out in nature and moving is
Mm-hmm.
so meaningful. I think I just went on leave for about 3 weeks up in the Pacific Northwest and just went on a million different hikes, and it was fabulous. Like I feel so much more centered in my soul. I kind of, like, you see the beauty in God's creation. And then I think spiritually, I've struggled. I will say I've struggled this year. The ability to not get over, you know, in the congregation has been, or, socially distanced, with masks, no singing, communion in your seat with the, I call them the Lunchables, communion.
Yes, yes, I use those.
Yeah.
It's a little
I
prepackaged cup, and you kind of open it
yeah,
up. Yeah,
yeah. You get your cracker first, and then your little juice or wine, whatever.
yeah,
Yeah. That really just hasn't done it for me. So, um, when I say I've struggled, it just finding that meaningful connection, because I just came back from deployment right before COVID hit, and I was looking for a congregation, and it just didn't end up connecting. And it's no one's fault. All the pastors have done a great job this past year, in a difficult situation, but I will say I did struggle, But I think with things getting better, I've been able to sort of employ those spiritual practices a little bit more, trying to be intentional about going to church and making sure I'm doing that. And then one of the things I've done since like 2011, is talk to a spiritual director at least once a month. And that's
mm,
someone who's a spiritual, like, it's a spiritual friend who keeps you honest about um, they'll challenge you. And so my spiritual director will say, okay, did you do the things that we talked about last month? And I'll be like, oh, no. And so, um, some months are better than others. But someone who kind of gives you a dispensation, it's okay to not be okay. So that's kind of for me. What about you?
yeah. Yes, for me, there's this idea for obviously self-awareness, and I think, and uh, being willing to accept when things are not okay. Like you said, it's okay that you're not okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in the last year especially, I've been trying to journal consistently, at least this year. So 2021, I've been journaling, and I use a 10-year journal, so it's actually got 10 years in parallel. So it's like 4 lines
Uh-huh.
stacked. So like, today is Friday the 16th of April.
Mm-hmm.
So I could see what happened last year, 16th of April, the year before that, 16th of April, the year before
Oh.
that, 16th of April. And it's just fascinating for me to be able to get outside of the moment and go, oh, wow, this is, life ebbs and flows. And there was a
It's like
struggle, and then there was a win. There's a struggle, then there's a win.
Facebook
And so,
memories.
sort of, yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes. So there's that idea, just kind of, that's being aware internally. There's this idea of kind of being able to cope and sit with your stuff, um, and not put that on my loved ones. Um, I mean, my kids do bear the brunt, um, and so that's hard because I don't want to project onto them when I'm having a bad day, and all of a sudden I just start like regulating and micromanaging,
Mm-hmm.
because but then also being plugged in to scriptures in a sense of immersing myself, um, as often as I can, just to see historically, like, mankind struggles, and God, like a good coach who is on the sideline, will let you be in the game. And when you're not in the game, you've got access to him. But when you're in the game, there's only so much you can really get from coach, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I see how God and mankind have this interaction, and that's encouraging for me to go, okay, sometimes we're just struggling, and the struggle bus shows up, and you got to get on the struggle bus. Um, And then sometimes you get off the struggle bus, and then you get back with God, and he goes, okay, now remember what I was saying to you. And so that's been kind of helpful too, is to kind of, it refreshes uh, that. So, um, being kind of, yeah, so being gracious to myself, being aware of myself, um, and then kind of being aware of God as that kind of that coaching relationship to a certain degree.
Mhm. I think I think it's interesting. One of the metaphors that I bring up a lot with some of my sailors is like, I'm like, oh, do you guys know the poem "The Footprints"? And they're like, no. Oh yeah, my grandma has that or something. And it's like, oh, it's the summary is like, oh, the guy's walking along and he dies and he goes to heaven and then he's talking to God and he looks back at his life and it's like footprints in the sand on a beach or something like that. And then he realizes like the darkest points in his life, there's only one set of footprints.
Mm-hmm.
And he asks God, like, hey, why'd you abandon me during these like, I'm sorry, I laughed because the next part's funny. Not funny, but yes, funny. Why'd you abandon me during the darkest parts of my life? And God answers, oh no, my son, that's when I carried you. And it's like, this is a wonderful sentiment. But one of my friends sent me this. I have a take on that because I always have a take on something. But sent me this comic which was based off of that, and it had like that scenario, and then it added
Uh-huh.
on like God's like, so you see that trench right there, and it's like that's where I drug you kicking and screaming. Oh, you see that hole? That's where you dug and tried to get away from me. And I went down and got you. And and so I love the sentiment behind that because I think even my mom has that somewhere. Like I remember that from my childhood. But I like the sentiment of that comic of like, that relationship with however you interpret the divine. For you and I, it's God and Jesus Christ and everything else like that.
Mm-hmm.
And at least in the way that I interpret it as, it's not necessarily the coach, but like someone walking along beside you. And I always tell people like you can choose to acknowledge it or not, but God doesn't leave you. And it's usually in the hindsight of 2020 where you see God like, oh, there's that trench. Oh, I remember I was kicking and screaming on that one, or that hole.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yes.
would
Yeah. And that's
say.
it. And that's, I say that's where I think the metaphor, I think you clarify the metaphor better, is that it's not that he's aloof and off to the side.
Mm-hmm.
He's there. It's just like he is going to let us experience the moment, knowing that he's right there.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
think a lot of 2020 was kicking and screaming for me, like just being
Yes.
drug along.
Our theme music is the song Josie O by James Stone. The views and opinions expressed are those of the hosts or guests and not the United States Navy. You can subscribe to Stepping Off the Brow wherever you find your favorite podcast. And of course, please feel free to share this with your shipmates, friends, or family. See you next week.